Hey, Jim, we should make, like, a female Bat character to add to the Batman mythos. I think that would be really cool.
Ooh, yeah, that's a great idea. I like that, because, we could make her the love interest of Batman. Bruce Wayne's going around with Robin, and people are starting to talk. They're starting to say that maybe he, bats for the other team, and that's not okay. We can't have that, so she'll come in and she'll dispel those rumors. She'll get those out of there.
No, but maybe we should just not...
Another thing we could do is, this is a great idea. I came up with this one myself. We could have her fight all the enemies that are, related to Batman's enemies. And then, this is the greatest idea of all. This is how we end her saga. Maybe it gets picked up later, who fucking cares? This is what we do. We cripple the bitch.
No, Jim, we should make her, a strong, independent character in comics. She doesn't have to rely on any man or anything like that. She's her own character, whoever this Batgirl might be. She should be a symbol for feminism and the women's liberation movement that's happening right now. And all this stuff. What are you, fucking gay? Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Hello and welcome to the show with Issues. I am Auram, and it's that time again. We may have another touchy subject, because apparently all I can talk about on this show anymore is controversy. Regardless, today I'm going to be bringing you a character analysis of Barbara Gordon's Batgirl, with a heavy emphasis on her status as a feminist symbol, which is to say that she provided a fantastic portrayal of a woman being equally as powerful and important as a man in comics. Feminism is about equality, not women being better than men, just to clear up any confusion. So let's jump right into it, starting with what I just mentioned, Batgirl as a feminist symbol. To truly explain this, we need to go all the way back to the 50s, 1954 to be more exact. 1954 was the year that Frederick Wertham published his infamous book Seduction of the Innocent, an analysis of comic books at the time and how they were poisoning our youth, which led to many changes in the comics and the establishment of the Comics Code Authority. One major claim Wertham made in the book was that Batman and Robin were in a relationship with each other, writing, "Sometimes Batman ends up in bed injured and young Robin is shown sitting next to him. At home they lead an idyllic life. They are Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson. Bruce Wayne described as a socialite, and the official relationship is that Dick is Bruce's ward. They live in sumptuous quarters with beautiful flowers in large vases. Batman is sometimes shown in a dressing gown. It is like a wish dream of two homosexuals living together." He continues later, touching more on Robin, saying he is buoyant with energy and devoted to nothing more than Bruce Wayne. He often stands with legs spread, the genital region discreetly evident. Regardless of whether or not this subtext was intended by the writers or even there to begin with, DC decided that they had to act on this claim. Enter Kathy Kane, the Batwoman of the Silver Age. Making her debut in 1956's Detective Comics number 233, Batwoman was primarily created as a knee-jerk reaction to be a love interest for Batman because of the outlandish claims that Wertham made. Mike Madrid wrote this about the character in his fantastic book, The Supergirls. "Let Wonder Woman keep her Herculean strength and her bulletproof armbands and her unbreakable lasso. Batwoman has all she needs to clean up crime in Gotham City right in her little red handbag. With her lipstick, powder, perfume, and hairnet, Batwoman would show the dynamic duo a thing or two about how a lady fights crime." To further refute any claims of Batman and Robin being more than friends, Batwoman's niece, Betty Kane, joined the fray as Batgirl, but with a hyphen for whatever reason. Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson had Batman and Robin, while Kathy and Betty Kane had Batwoman and Batgirl. Together with a few extras, they formed the Bat Family, and people slowly started to lose interest in the Batman comics with these characters involved. Sales were dropping because of the zany science fiction tonal shift in these comics, so in 1964, with Detective Comics number 327, new editor Julia Schwartz made a change. The Bat Family was all gone, except Robin, and Alfred was killed off, being replaced by Dick Grayson's Aunt Harriet. It's also worth mentioning that this last change was probably done to dispel any lasting rumors of Bruce and Dick having too much fun in that big mansion all by themselves. Now they had a woman to keep them in check. Anyway, let's skip forward a bit to 1966, where Batman's TV show is about to enter its third season. Editor Schwartz was asked by the producers of the show to create a new female character to boost ratings and attract a new female audience to the show, so he did. Nearly simultaneously in 1966, Barbara Gordon was introduced to the comics and the silver screen with Detective Comics number 359 and Batman's third season. In that fateful first comic appearance, Barbara Gordon, daughter of the Gotham Police Commissioner, was planning to crash the policeman's masquerade ball, dressed in a bat costume. "The whole world thinks I'm just a plain Jane, a colorless female brain. I'll show them a far more imposing girl tonight." On the way, however, Babs stumbled upon some some action and acquired a genuine thirst for crime fighting, leaving behind her childish impulse to intrude on her father's event. This new Batgirl wasn't seen as a companion piece to Batman of any kind, although she did initially come to blows with him for being a female crime fighter. In her debut issue, Batman said, "This is a case for Batman and Robin. I'm sorry, but you must understand that we can't worry ourselves about a girl." Barbara ignored this and continued operating as Batgirl, breaking the status quo. Female superheroes at the time were written very differently than male superheroes. For example, Bruce Wayne devoted his entire life to crime fighting and being the Batman, while Kathy Kane quit her vigilante days as Batwoman almost immediately at Batman's request, without any argument. This difference quickly made Batgirl become a symbol for feminism, especially since her inception was at the height of the women's liberation movement, which came to a head in the 60s and 70s. Another huge proponent of this was that Batgirl was her own character, not stuck in the shadow of her male counterpart. Mike Madrid explained this more eloquently than I could ever dream of describing it, so take it away, me reading from his book. Batgirl goes on a personal campaign to rid her home, Gotham City, of crime, plain and simple, and as pure a motive as any man might have. She doesn't don a costume and throw herself into danger to prove her love for Batman. Yes, she wears his symbol on her chest, but she is not his girlfriend or his faithful handmaiden. Certainly, Batgirl wants Batman to respect her as a detective and an agent of justice, but she doesn't require his validation or protection. She is a creature of more enlightened times, and there was no way that Batman could have belittled or controlled Batgirl the way he had Batwoman a few years earlier. Batgirl is a female who Batman can actually regard as a brilliant peer and a partner in the war on crime, the same way he would a male. And hey, if you don't entirely agree with Madrid's or my analysis, take DC's word for it. When readers complained about the lack of Kathy Kane's Batwoman, a weak character, DC themselves wrote this in the letters page of 1971's Detective Comics number 417. We'd like to say a few words about the reaction some readers have to Batgirl. These are readers who remember Batwoman and the other Batgirls from years back. These characters were invented when the time was right for bats. They were there because romance seemed to be needed in Batman's life. This sentiment, of course, referring to them needing to save face from Wortham's claims by introducing two female characters. Continuing, DC said, thanks to the big change in a foresighted editor, these hapless females are gone for good. In their place stands a girl who is a capable crime fighter, a far cry from Batwoman who constantly had to be rescued from Batman. That is a very feminist idea. DC themselves stated that Batgirl was created as a counter to hapless females who constantly needed to be rescued by Batman. Barbara Gordon continued with this trend as a strong, independent bat who needs no man for decades, up until 1988 with Batgirl Special No. 1, written by Barbara Kessel. In this issue, Babs finally hung up the cape and cowl and retired for good, returning to her life as a bookish librarian. She was stuck as a background character for a brief period until one fateful night depicted in Alan Moore's The Killing Joke. In the story, Barbara is essentially used as nothing more than a plot device, being shot and paralyzed from the waist down by Joker to make her father go crazy so that Joker could prove a point to Batman. This was given next to no thought by Moore, who said this on the subject. I asked DC if they had any problem with me crippling Barbara Gordon, who was Batgirl at the time, and if I remember, I spoke to Len Wein, who got back onto the phone and said, yeah, okay, cripple the bitch. Now, to be fair to Moore, he did later express regret on treating Babs so poorly in his story, saying it was shallow and ill-conceived, but this did raise some rather concerning contradictions with Batgirl's status as a feminist symbol and the path that this story led her down. She became Oracle after The Killing Joke, a superhero in her own right, sure, but was mostly confined to working for Batman and his friends, in their shadows. And here's another issue with Batgirl's status as a feminist symbol. She totes herself as being her own vigilante, fighting her own battles against crime in Gotham, Burnside, or wherever she may be, but at the same time, a lot of her rogues gallery and stories are borrowed from the Batman mythos. Just look back at The Killing Joke and her paralysis. This is a monumental moment in Batgirl's history, a moment where she was used as nothing more than a small part of Batman's greatest enemy's plan. Barbara was definitely a strong female character in comics, but the lack of a breakout Batgirl solo title and very few Batgirl-led stories in other books is definitely concerning. In fact, it wasn't until the year 2000 that the first Batgirl solo title was launched, and it wasn't even Barbara Gordon, it was Cassandra Cain. The following decade, Batgirl, now Oracle's romps, were mostly confined to assisting Batman and being the tech girl for the Birds of Prey. She was in this weird fugue state of being a character that just kind of existed. In 2011, however, DC's New 52 initiative was launched, breathing new life into their lineup and putting Barbara Gordon back into the Batgirl uniform. Gail Simone brought Barbara into a whole new era. DC's continuity had been stripped down and condensed, with Babs being around 5 years into her career at the time of Batgirl No. 1. She was working under Batman as Batgirl for a full year before retiring, Killing Joke happening, and her becoming Oracle. 3 years and an experimental surgery later, and she's back as Batgirl, but with a whole host of non-superhero traditional issues. One thing the book is truly about is that the after effects of something like PTSD, post-traumatic post-traumatic stress disorder or other trauma-related syndromes can strike even very smart, very intellectually tough people, even soldiers and cops. We have seen very little about this in superhero comics, really. People return from the dead, people are tortured, the world is threatened, and the next day, it's as if it was all forgotten. This was Simone's mission statement with her take on Batgirl. She's not just the girl Batman, she's her own crime fighter with her own villains and mental issues to combat. But at the same time, all of her mental issues, the survivor's guilt, the PTSD, stem from, once again, the Joker, Batman's greatest enemy. And this isn't to say this is a bad thing. Simone took Alan Moore's careless use of Babs in The Killing Joke and turned it into a catalyst for some really amazing stories with the character. But it's when some writers pit her against some of Batman's villains, or villains related to Batman's villains, that this becomes a problem. It weakens Batgirl's independence from her inspiration. Even from a basic storytelling perspective, it's just not great writing. Take these couple issues from her current Rebirth run. Babs is on her way back from China on a plane where she runs into Poison Ivy, trying to transport a rare plant. This is just highly convenient timing. Not only did Babs happen to run into a villain on her plane back to America, but it also ended up being Poison Ivy, one of Batman's villains, not one of her own. To play devil's advocate even further, we should talk about her namesake. She is Batgirl, part of the Bat family, so shouldn't she be fighting Bat villains and being part of Bat events all the time? Well, yes and no. In Simone's run on the character, Babs is in Gotham. She's in the thick of it. Here it makes sense that she would run into Batman's rogues gallery or be tied into Bat events, but when she's literally anywhere else, it gets awfully convenient. And besides, at the end of the day, Batgirl herself has expressed the aspirations to be her own hero. She's not the hapless women that the Kanes were. She wants to show people that she's not just another colorless female brain. In Barbara's own words, written by Gail Simone in Batgirl #6, similar name and wardrobe, sure, but she stood apart. She was Batgirl. I hope something I said here today resonated. I tried with this video to get a couple ideas in your head. Batgirl is a strong feminist character, and that at the same time, she's not perfect in this regard, much like the state of women in comics as a whole. Huge shout out to Mike Madrid's The Supergirls and Gail Simone's Batgirl for serving as inspiration for this video. Both are incredible works that you guys should definitely check out. If you want some more Bat goodness without all this feminism analysis stuff, my buddy Jay over at FT Productions has a whole playlist filled with just that. You'll also see a familiar face over there, seeing as I did a review of Tom King's Batman that will not go up on this channel. You can only see it there, so go watch it. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Next time I use my hidden laser spatula to defeat my enemies, because that makes sense.